right, year 10. I think I'm doing this without the webcam because I want to use the full screen here. The first time you run Blender, you're going to get this little quick setup. And I think that you should change one thing here, which is to change the spacebar from play to search. If you don't, it's not a big deal. The Blender dark theme is way better than the Blender light theme, which just looks dated. So I'm going to use Blender dark. We're going to click select with left if it's not already selected, and we'll use the Blender shortcuts there. And we'll click save new settings. Now, don't change any of these things. The only one you should change is the spacebar. Change it to search because we're not going to be working with animation for a while. And we will need to use search at times. The others just leave. And we'll click save new settings. Now that's going to bring us to the normal Blender loading screen, and we're going to click new file and go to general. Now in here, the Blender interface is actually pretty complex. Okay, there's a lot of stuff going on. We've got in the middle, we should have a cube. This little symbol here is a light, and then over here we have a camera. Okay, so this camera here will like render our scene. It's what, if we were going to be making like a movie or an animation, it's what it would show. And I can switch into the camera like that. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to do that at the moment. We'll cover those things later. Now, over here, we've got a bunch of tools down the left-hand side, but we're actually not going to use these tools in particular. We are going to learn some shortcut keys in order to make it a lot quicker to work with Blender. So you'll see here we've got red line going through there and a green line going through there. There is also a third line which doesn't show up. We can make it show up, but we don't need it to be. And that is the blue line that runs up and down. That is the Z axis. So you guys are probably familiar with X and Y. And then we have a third axis because we're in 3 dimensions, which is the Z axis. You'll see up here this little widget. We can actually click this widget to switch to any of those particular viewpoints, and then we can get out of there. So the way that we move around in Blender is important, and it's important to know how to do it, because without knowing how to navigate, doing the 3D modeling is going to be really, really complex. So the main thing, the first thing you'll do is use the middle mouse button to rotate around the position that you're looking at. Okay, so that's the middle mouse button. Then if you hold shift and use the middle mouse button, you can pan. So that will let you kind of pan your scene. And then if I hold middle mouse, notice that it's rotating around somewhere here in the middle, not the object that I was looking at before. Now if I want to focus on an object, I can push the full stop on the number pad. So not the full stop near the letter M, but the full stop on the number pad next to the letter 0. That'll let me focus on an object. It actually zooms right in on it, but it does center that object in the screen so I can rotate around it. If I want to zoom in and out, I can use the mouse wheel. So the scroll wheel will zoom in and out of my scene. And then you can see that that's in the center there. So we've got these tools that we can use. And 0 will focus on something. I can zoom back out from there. If I want to focus on this light, I can left click it, click the full stop, it focuses on the light. I can then rotate around that light. Left click to focus down here. I can rotate around that. I can look at that object. I can zoom in and out from there. Now there's a few things that we'll want to do with this particular object, and that is moving them. So we can move objects. There's a few different ways to move objects. You can click this button here, and we've also got rotate, and we've got scale. And there is this transform tool as well. This is actually pretty handy to use here. There are shortcut keys for all of these, which I'll go through in a minute. But the transform tool just has all 3 of these combined. You'll see here, if I click this little green arrow, it moves it along that green axis. If I click the red arrow, it moves it along the red axis. And if I click the blue arrow, it moves it along the blue axis as well. Now I'm just going to undo all that and reset it back to 0, 0, 0. This is in the panel over here. It's the transform of the object. Now the transform refers to its position in 3D space. Not only its position, but its rotation and its scale. And these should all be 0, 0, 0, 0, and the scale should be 1. We can change those, and I'll show you. So if I click on this square, I can change the scale. You'll see the scale along that x-axis is now 6.2. I can change the scale along the y-axis. I can change the scale along that axis there as well. And I can also change the rotation. You'll see the rotation on the right is changing. There's no upper limit. If I rotate it like 3,000 degrees, it means it's gone around about 10 times. It's the same as going around once, but it's just saying that I could do that because I may need to do it in an animation, have it rotate 10 different times. So I'll undo that. And those are the different tools that we can use. We can actually manually set these. You don't need to click the arrows. You can just click on the area and drag, and it will move them left and right. But lastly, the most important part is actually the shortcut keys for this, which is way more useful. So G will grab it, and it will let you move it around. But say I only want to move it along the y-axis. Well, it's as simple as pushing the Y button, and I now only move it along the y-axis. If I push the X, it now only moves along the x-axis. And if I push the Z, you see that blue line is now visible, and it only moves along the z-axis. If I hold Control down while I'm moving it, it will move in increments of 1, or whatever the grid space unit is, which the default is like 1 unit. So it will move in increments of 1. So I can move it up 1. Well, I'll just actually, it's there. So GZ, I'll move it up 1. GY, I'll move it across 1. And then GX, I'll move it up 1 here. And so now it's perfectly at the intersection of those different things there. I'll just reset that back to normal. So we've got those tools there which will let us move things around, will let us grab things. And T does not, even though T is, oh sorry, never mind. That's an old tool. If I move over this, you'll see it says move, and G is called grab. It used to be called translate. If I moved over this, it used to be called translate, and you'd think T is for translate. And if you've used Unity, I think T is for translate, and translate is just another word for move or grab. But G in Blender grabs it. If I want to rotate it, well, that's easier to remember. It's just the R key. So R will rotate. It rotates around the viewpoint as though there was an invisible line going from my eye all the way through the screen, skewering that object, and then I can spin it. But maybe we don't want to rotate it like that, and generally you won't. You'll want to rotate it around one of these axes. So let's say I want to rotate it around the y-axis, which is the green one. Well, now it's only going to rotate around that. And all I did was push Y. X will rotate around that. Z will rotate around that. So it's as though as there's an invisible skewer stuck through it, and you're spinning that skewer and the object is rotating with it. Scale is the same. Scale is for S. I can hit scale, and I can also hold Control and scale it up in different increments. You'll see up here in the top left corner where my mouse is now that there is a number there. Currently it says -4. I'm not sure why it said negative instead of normal value, but if I move this here and then go up to there, you see it says 4.1 or so. That's going to scale it up 4 times. If I hold Control, it's going to go in increments of 0.1. So I can get it exactly. But I can also just type the number in. So this is the same with any of the G, rotate or whatever. So say if I want to rotate something along the x-axis 90 degrees, I can hit R. X, I won't rotate it 90 because it'll look the exact same. So I'll rotate it 45. See up in the top left corner, it says 45 here along the x-axis. So that was really easy. I just hit R, I hit X. See, I can rotate it freely there, and I type 45. It doesn't look like it's doing anything here, but up in the top left corner there, it is saying 45 along the global X. I can hit enter, and that's done. Then I could do RZ 45. Not 456, 45, and it will rotate. And you can see over here that that's changed exactly. So I could do it over here. Sometimes you may want to move things, G, Y. Maybe I want to move it 3 units. Let's move 3 units now. 1, 2, and then the center is there. So this here is the basic navigation for Blender. Now what I want you to do, you can probably skip forward a little bit as I go through this part here, but I'm going to add in, I'll add back in that cube. I accidentally deleted it, and I'm going to start creating just a really simple little monster. Actually, you will need to watch this next bit. So I'm going to add meshes. We're just going to add meshes. You don't want to change your object mode into edit mode. You just want to be working in object mode for now, and we'll get to that shortly. But add mesh, and the mesh is going to be a cylinder. Now this cylinder here, when I add it, you can see that it's got lots of different sides to it. So it's not a perfect cylinder, because a perfect cylinder would take up infinite sides, okay, or 0 sides in effect, but it would have so many of these things going around that it would crash the computer. So what we need to do down the bottom here, we've got this little thing that appears, it's called add cylinder. By the way, if you move this at all, that's gone. Add cylinder is gone. You can't change the cylinder. So I'm going to just go back and add that cylinder again. And then I'm going to open this little panel down here, and I get the option to change. Well, how many vertices do I want on my cylinder? And that's talking about the vertices. It's basically another way of saying edges in this case. But how many vertices around each top? So there's one there. I'll go from the bottom. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That was 8, sorry. 8. That's what I've said there. And then I go 9, adds an extra side, and so on. I can also determine the radius here. So I can make a really thin one, I can make it really big, etc. The depth is how deep it's going to be. These are mostly changeable afterwards, especially the radius and the depth, but the number of vertices can't be changed, okay? Not easily. And so, in fact, it really can't be changed at all. So you need to make sure that you set this up before you make any changes to it. So I'm going to change mine to about 12. The location stuff doesn't really matter at this case. And then the cap fill, you can either have nothing, which means it's just a literal cylinder, n-gon, or a triangle fan, which won't look different here. But if I go into wireframe, it will. So an n-gon just means it's a polygon with 12 sides in this case. And that's what the default is. So you don't need to worry too much about that. Go back to not rendered. I'm pushing Z here, by the way. You'll see different keys or same keys do different things depending on what I'm doing. If I hit G and Z, well then I can move it up and down. But if I just hit Z, I can change the view that I'm looking at. So I can go wireframe, or I can go back to solid. Rendered and material preview we'll look at later. Pretty much we should just be working in solid. So I'm going to set the radius of this to be a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to move this. I'm just going to move it over here. I'm not going to be exact with this. Then I'm going to make a duplicate of it. I can make a duplicate of this by either pushing Shift D or Alt D. Alt D will make a duplicate. That means if I make any changes to this, I'll show you. I'll duplicate that and move it along the Y-axis to there. If I make any changes to either of these, both of them are going to work. But it doesn't matter. You can use Alt D or Shift D to make a duplicate. I think you can also right click on it and duplicate objects or duplicate link. And you see Shift D, Alt D is the shortcut key there. Okay, and then when you duplicate it, it will be kind of, I'm not holding my mouse down at all here. It will be freely connected to your mouse, and you can hit Y and lock it in. So these are going to be legs. Now I'm going to make some arms as well. So I will duplicate these. Actually, we'll use a different object for the arms. I'm going to use a mesh. I'm going to use a UV, an icosphere for the arms. Now the icosphere can have a certain number of subdivisions on it. If you turn this all the way up, you will crash the computer. You will lose all your work. Don't do it. So you've probably already done it with the cylinder, so you've realized that. Every time I turn this up, if I have one subdivision, I've got probably about 12 sides there, I think. If I have two subdivisions, I've gone up to, it's not quite, it's like 3 times the amount. And then I'm timesing it by 3 again. And then I'm timesing it by 3 again. I think it's timesing by 3, mainly because the faces are triangles. So every time you go up, it's like 3 to the power of 3 to the power of 3 to the power of 3 and so on, and it just gets massive. In fact, you can see down in the bottom right hand corner this number of tries. So if I turn that up to 3, now I've got 376, so I did actually increase it by 3. If I turn up to 4, I've got 1,336, and if I go one more, I've got 5,000. If I go one more, I've got 20,000 tries. It looks really smooth, it looks really nice, but I've got 20,000 tries just on this one object. A try is just a literal triangle. 3 vertices that make up a triangle. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this though is I'm just going to leave it at 2, the default. I'm going to scale it a little bit, and I'm going to move it up to here. Now I'm going to go into the front view, so X. Then I'm going to duplicate this, Shift D, move it down a little bit, scale it down. Shift D, move it down a little bit, scale it down. Shift D. Now I'm just guessing where this goes like that. Okay, I'll click on this one, I'll go Shift D, I'll move it across to there. Shift D, scale it down. Shift D, scale it down. Now this is not how you would normally, if I need to reposition it, I can hit G. Now because we were in this particular view, I clicked the X here, they're all aligned. I didn't accidentally do it. If I try to do it like this, and I grab this and I go Shift G, okay, that looks pretty good there, and scale it down. What I've actually done, well, it kind of worked, but unless that's a Blender 2.8 feature, it's not quite centered with the other ones. But you should use these views at the front. So I only wanted things to move along that axis. Now I'm going to add one more object in, add mesh, a UV sphere. I just want you to see the difference between the icosphere and the UV sphere. UV sphere uses squares. It's got a certain number of segments, a certain number of rings, and so on. And I'm going to just move that up, G, Z, scale it to there. Bring it in. And what I want you to do now is just be creative. Use some of these other shapes, meshes, you've got cones, you've got this torus here. If I add the torus, it's like a donut, but you've got all these options down the bottom, major segments and minor segments. Turn them down, and you don't want to turn them right up, okay? You want to turn them down. The reason for that is there are ways to make low poly, or low tri, models look high poly. It's very easy, you just right click and click shade smooth. Now that actually looks like it has a lot more polygons than it has, unless you look carefully at the sides here, and you will probably notice this in video games, especially in cutscenes, where there's like a high detail character and you look at it from an angle, it's like, why is that part of their face flat? Or why is their shoulder kind of flat, looks like it's made out of a triangle? And that's because of this smooth shading effect and other effects that we'll talk about later with materials. But I could move that up to here, scale it in, get it sitting on his head right, and I could maybe make a top hat from there. So there's a lot of things that I can do with just these objects. Obviously this doesn't look great, but we will get to adding some new things soon. Oops, left click selects, and I could go through it. Now what you can't do is, oh, you can do it now, that's amazing. All right, you didn't used to be able to do that. You can select multiple things. So you can hold shift and click and select multiple things, right click and shade smooth. Select the things that I want, shade smooth. I'll shade these legs smooth. Now you'll notice that the legs go kind of funny. It looks like it doesn't quite look right along there. There's one thing we can do to fix that, and it's by using a really simple quick modifier. It's over here, add modifier, and it is called an edge split. If you add that, sometimes it doesn't work the way that's intended, but at least down here, I'll add it to this one as well, add modifier, edge split. I can turn that angle, yeah, if I just turn the angle up a little bit, there we go. And so now those bits are smooth and those bits are smooth, but if I turn this off, I'll just hit the X on that, you see it kind of all looks like one thing. If I turn it on, it looks like a smooth cylinder. The edge split modifier is really good for smooth shading stuff. You don't need to apply it on things like this. It's only when something like, for example, this cube, which shouldn't have a smooth shade modifier applied to it because it is a cube. But stuff like that, you can apply that edge split and it'll look quite good. Now, this guy's body is quite wide, so I can scale it, but I can scale it just along one axis. I can either grab this and bring it in, or I could hit S, X, and bring it in. I could hold Control and bring it in on certain angles like that. Okay, so there's my little dude. Be creative, add a face, add some other bits to it, give him some hands, give him some feet. Do what you want with that and make a little character just using these mesh shapes here. Okay, yes, there is a monkey head. You can throw the monkey head somewhere, but I'd like you to create your own face. Maybe just put the monkey head in his hand. There we go. Done.